Welcome to this week's Power Rankings, and keep in mind this is the Canucks Adidas, where the white doesn't go all the way to the end of the S, which breaks people. It's so weird, isn't it? I don't want it because it doesn't go to the other. Give me a break. So I figured people would have that to complain about, so they won't complain about my Power Rankings. Of course they will. Number 31. These guys were 26 the first week, 30 last week, and 31 last week. They're still 31. That's 2 weeks in a row that the Minnesota Wild are last on the Power Rankings. And I had expected it to be the New Jersey Devils, but the Devils pulled it out. Number 30. These guys were 31 for 2 weeks. They were 29 last week and clearly went to their heads because Ottawa's back down to 30. Ottawa, again, the effort is there. There's a lot of effort, and I think the coaching's decent. They just, the level of talent is not, and you know what's funny is watching them and keeping track of stats and looking at their roster, it feels like an expansion team. It feels there's so much that got stripped away. They feel like an expansion team, a proper expansion team, not the Vegas going to the Stanley Cup final where they broke the rules of the expansion team. I mean, worst team in the league expansion team where it's all about the effort and you know they're not going to win. Really feels like an expansion team. Number 29. These guys started on here at number 12, dropped to number 15, and then last week dropped to 23. And this week they dropped 6 more spots to 29. And before they beat Philly tonight, they were 30th. So by beating Philly and the Senators losing in Arizona, they move up to 29th. I hope it doesn't go to their heads because they're not that far ahead of 31. This has been a really rough start to the season for Dallas. Some encouraging signs coming out of that game tonight against Philly, but I'm still not 100% convinced. I want to be. I really desperately want to be. Number 28. And these guys started the season at 14. They dropped to 19. Then they dropped to 30. Now they're number 28. So they move up 2 spots this week, and that's Jersey. Back-to-back wins, move them up. Not a lot, because I want to see more out of them. That game against Vancouver. Vancouver looked sleepy. Yes, New Jersey beat them. Good game for them. But what that did was it hurt Vancouver's progress, which had actually been pretty impressive on this chart up until that game this morning. So for New Jersey, if they win a couple more games this week, they will absolutely bump their way up. But for now, I've left them in 28th. Number 27. These guys started the 30th, moved up to 27, moved up to 20, and now they're back to 27th. So they moved up 7 spots. Everything looked good. And then, reality kind of set in for Detroit this week. Brutal week for them and for their fans, and they're back down to 27th. So their rise didn't take. That's what I'm saying. Number 26. And these guys have been on, this is an interesting one. 29 the first week, 28 the second week, 27 the third week, and now the Kings are 26. I joked last week that every single week if they move up, they'll be in the top 5 by the end of the year. I don't know. The win over Calgary is why they're 26 and not 27. I had them in 27 coming into tonight. That win over Calgary was very impressive. But again, they're 3 and 5, right? So I can only move them up so much. I don't want to take a team and my power rankings up until about 3/4 of the way through last season were always very, very reactionary. So I would always be kind of surprised at where teams were, and then I'd show you guys on Saturday, go, here they are. I don't want to do that. So I've already got to the point where I'm kind of controlling the crazy swings one way or the other. There are still some crazy swings on this one, but things in general are more controlled. Number 25. They were 25 to start the season, moved up to 21, moved up to 17, and now they've dropped 8 spots back to 25. They've dropped to where I had them to start the season. And it's interesting. I had Ottawa in 31 to start the season. They're now 30. I had Detroit 30. They're now 27. I had LA in 29. They're now 26. Anaheim and Edmonton have kind of moved up since then. Minnesota's dropped from 26 down to 31, and Philadelphia's 25th, just like they were at the start. So, kind of a crazy thing, but it makes me feel a little bit better about those first preseason predictions that I kind of did through power rankings, and yet I predicted Philly to make the playoffs, so I don't want them to stay down here because then that just blows up that prediction. Number 24. These guys move up from 28 last week, which was a giant drop from 24 the week before and 10 the week before that. And that's San Jose. San Jose would have been higher. The loss to Buffalo tonight, I didn't penalize them for that. I thought they played well, and Buffalo is one of the best teams in the league. I know, it's weird to me too. But, they came out well, and they just came up short at the very end, and I couldn't really penalize them for that. Again, I don't want it to just be, okay, so with this result you drop, with this result you go up, which is the way I did it, and I found that created scenarios where it was just crazy all the time. Number 23. These guys started at 20, dropped to 26. Were 26 last week as well, and they're back up to 23, and that's Columbus. So Columbus moves up 3 spots. Again, they're able to force overtime 2 games in a row. They lose both of them in overtime, extra time. And so the points are there. They're not technically below 500, but they've won 3 out of 8. Their goaltending's been better than I had expected. And so, they're in the mix. Columbus is one of those teams that, if they could put together 3 or 4 wins in a row, they can scare the rest of the Metro. But for right now, they're just kind of hanging around. Number 22. Last week they were 25. The week before that they were 23. The week before that 21. So I started the season with Chicago in 21, and right now they're 22. So Chicago, they did fall last week to 25. They're back up to 22, and a couple wins will do that for you. They have not played enough games for me to really have a great grasp on them. That's why the Rangers aren't on the board yet either. So for people who are saying, wait, the Rangers are only 2-3. Yet they really haven't played that many games. I want to see, tomorrow they're playing at home against Vancouver. I want to see how that one goes. And then I can make a decision about whether or not, because again, we really haven't seen that much of the Rangers. And number 21. These guys started the season at 15. They were at 16. Last week I had them at 15, and that's the Jets. They dropped to 21 this week. So last week there was a lot of criticism over me having them at 15, that they should be higher. Well, this week they're lower than that because they're 4-5 now. So they went from 4-2 to 4-5. All of the concerns that I had when they were 4-2 have increased now that they're 4-5. And if Buffalo's going to make the decision to come back and play, now's a good time. Winnipeg needs them because the Central still feels kind of wide open. You have Colorado, who look like they're going to run away with it. Nashville looks like they're going to have a pretty good record as well. But outside of that, it's really wide open. So if he can come back and solidify that blue line and cut down on the dangerous chances against the Jets, which have been really high this year, they can be in the mix for a top 3 spot in that division. Absolutely. Number 20. So they started the year at 24. They moved up to 18. Last week they were 16. The Rangers are 20. So they dropped 4 spots from last week. But I didn't go crazy and drop them all the way down into here because, again, they haven't played that many games. So there hasn't been that big of a body of work for me to look at and go, oh, this is a disaster. Are they in a playoff spot? No. But again, they've played 5 games. There are teams in the league that have played 10, and the Rangers have played 5. So we're in kind of bizarro world right now when it comes to the scheduling. And we complain about the scheduling, but it never seems to really change. It's just one of those things. Number 19. They started the season for me at 9. They dropped to 10. Last week they dropped to 22. So I made a huge adjustment. Well, this week they move up 3 spots, and that's Florida. Florida's started to show signs, but they're wildly inconsistent in-game. This isn't a game-to-game thing. This is in-game where they'll look like they're fantastic, and then it just kind of falls apart. Now, the biggest concern I have with Florida is Bobrovsky and his numbers. And I didn't think that would be a problem necessarily, although he had a slow start last year for Columbus as well. There were points in his tenure with Columbus last season where things were kind of contentious between he and John Tortorella, and he wasn't playing very well. So it's mildly alarming. They're not out of the race. Nobody's out of the race right now. Even Minnesota's not technically out of the race. But I do have some concerns. So whether it's him or whether it's the defense in front of him, I have some concerns when it comes to Florida. Number 18. They started the season in 23rd. They moved down to 29 the week after, and they were 21 last week. I have Vancouver in 18th this week. The highest they got was 17th. They dropped today. And so Vancouver, again, remember, playoffs is top 16. So I'm still not looking at Vancouver and going, playoffs, even though I'm all decked out in Vancouver gear. But there's some encouraging signs here. The problem is they had encouraging signs last year too. When I was looking at last year's record and comparing it to this year's, I was like, oh, this is eerily similar. So this East Coast swing, where tomorrow they play the Rangers, they're not in must-win territory, but they're in to be kind of nice if you won this territory, because we really don't want to see this again. We've already seen this movie and it ends badly. So they need to turn that narrative around. And if they came out of the first 10 games at 6-3-1, just as an example, I think fans would start feeling pretty good about things. Pacific looks pretty solid right now. You've got your top 3 teams are Anaheim, Edmonton, and Vegas, not in that order. Of course, Edmonton's number 1. But they all look pretty solid right now. So for Vancouver, you're fighting for a wild card spot in all likelihood with the way things are right now. One of them might fall down, but I'm just saying for right now, the road to the playoffs is still going to be a challenge. They have to be above 500 and well above 500. All right, number 17. They started the season at 19. They dropped to 25. Last week they were 24. They move up 7 spots this week, and that's Arizona, because they can score. This team right now sits in a playoff position, and they can score. The Coyotes can score. And if they can keep that up, they will move up again. So again, they move up 7 spots this week from where they were last week. It's an impressive jump. And I'm very impressed with what Arizona's done so far this season, because the offense is there. And they haven't really needed Kessel for that. I mean, Kessel started to provide it, but they haven't really needed him. Their goaltending's been excellent. Both goalies playing very, very well. Number 16. They started the season at 2, moved to 4, and dropped to 5. Large market adjustment. Dropping 11 spots, the St. Louis Blues. I could kind of look at that loss to Vancouver and go, okay, well, it's a shootout, all right. But that loss to Montreal, the second loss to Montreal in 8 days, it's alarming. And it's alarming because of how they're losing. So again, while St. Louis fans are not going to be panicking, they're still like, hey, we won the Cup. We had a bad start last year. It really doesn't matter. For the power rankings, and for me saying here's who I think is playing the best right now, I could not have St. Louis in the top 2 rows this week. Couldn't do it. Not based on the results and not based on just the overall numbers. They don't bear out. So even though Binnington is better than Allen, and we know that's not a surprise, the fact that Allen doesn't look like he's up to par right now, and they may have to start thinking about bringing up Husso, that's going to affect your ranking too, because then you are stuck playing Binnington probably more than you want to, and that can lead to wearing down Jordan Binnington. So the overall numbers for St. Louis are somewhat problematic, and so that's why they dropped. Okay, I just had to go in and edit the review, so I start this while the review is still uploading. So thumbs up when it works. So at number 16, I have St. Louis, and again, I know there'll be people who somewhat are upset. There will be other people saying, see, it's about time you dropped St. Louis, so probably about a little bit of each. Number 15, they started the season at 13, moved up to 11, dropped to 19, now they're back up to 15, and that's the Islanders. Gave up a lot of chances against Columbus in the third period tonight. They end up winning it in overtime. A lot of close games for the Islanders, and yet they are 5-3. They're doing very well. And I would anticipate if that trend continues, they absolutely push their way into the top 2 rows next week. These top 2 rows, honestly, I had a really hard time trying to figure out when to stop dropping St. Louis. Because all of the teams in the top 2 rows, I think, belong there. And I was saying, all right, well, this team's playing better than St. Louis. Yeah, I would say this one's playing better than St. Louis as well. So it got really tricky. At number 14, now they started the season at 3. They dropped to 5. Last week they were 12, and that's Tampa. Tampa would have been much higher than 14th if not for the huge loss at home against Colorado tonight. This is a Jekyll and Hyde team. They played Boston. They played what I thought was their best game of the year, and then this happens tonight against Columbus. I don't know where they're at. I mean, I still think they're top 2 rows. Could I make the argument they belong down below Arizona? I probably could. And yet, against Boston, they played really, really well. So for that reason, it's really difficult to get a read on these guys. But we're moving to the part of the year where it's not really early yet. Notice we're up into week 3 of me doing power rankings since the season started. We're getting beyond that. Well, it's early. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. You can get to a point where you wait too long, and then you have so much space to make up. It just gets really difficult with all the 3-point games going on ahead of you. Number 13. They started the season at 7, dropped to 8, dropped to 9. Now they've dropped 4 spots, and that's Calgary. Calgary, yeah, you lose to LA like that, you're going to drop. The Flames, they're another Jekyll and Hyde team, much like Tampa. And another week like this, and the Islanders pass them, and so to Arizona. I don't know that anybody else down here has that kind of potential, although the Rangers could. Again, 5 games, it's impossible to really tell. And with the Flames having played so many games, and it's being mentioned the Flames have had a brutal schedule to start the season with travel and just with not getting days off, but that's just the way it works. And they don't get a day off tomorrow either. I think it's 7 games in 11 days. It is a brutal schedule, but I have to go with the results, and the results so far are kind of middling with them. So we'll see if after they've had some days off, if it helps. But tomorrow, they are in against Anaheim, which is going to be a tough game for them, especially coming off that loss to the Kings. Number 12, these guys started the season at 18, moved up to 13, dropped to 14 last week, and now I've got Montreal at 12. Montreal, again, and I would put them kind of in the same category as these two in that you don't really know from one game to the next what you're going to get. Now, they beat Minnesota 4-0. Minnesota's down here. So when you beat a team that's down in these bottom 3, I'm going to look at that and go, they're playing pretty badly. So it's more likely to hurt you if you lose to one of these teams, a la Tampa Bay, then it's going to help you if you beat them, because that's kind of the expected result. So for Montreal, really impressive couple of victories they've had over St. Louis, thus St. Louis being beneath them on the power rankings. And for me, Montreal is still kind of sussing things out, figuring themselves out. But yeah, they look pretty solid right now in that they're in a playoff spot. If the playoffs started today, they'd be in them, and Tampa wouldn't. It's a bizarre world. But again, early, right? Number 11. These guys started the season at 5, then they were 3, then they were 7, and right now I've got Vegas at 11. Now for Vegas, teams have passed them, and Vegas looked definitely better tonight with that win over Pittsburgh than they have during the week. Now, again, they beat Ottawa, but they beat them in a shootout, and that's expected. You are expected to beat Ottawa. So again, for Vegas, their overall record's at 5-3. The 3 losses, I had some issues with some things, but again, they're still ahead of a lot of teams. They're ahead of 20 teams. Oh, Vegas fans aren't going to be happy. Number 10. They started the season at 8. They dropped to 9. They moved up to 8. And now I've got them at 10, and that's Nashville. Nashville's just lingering around this one spot, 10, 9, 8. They've been in those 3 spots so far this year. And I'm fine with it. Of course, they beat Vegas this week. That was a very telling game to me, was that Vegas lost at home against Nashville. And again, Vegas won that game on the road. We'll see how the rest of the road trip goes. But for me, I have Nashville ahead of Vegas. Nashville's problem, though, is that there's too many comebacks needed. At some point during the season, those comebacks are going to run out unless you're last year's Calgary. And maybe they're this year's Calgary. Maybe that's what happens. But the fact that they give up the lead regularly, give up those first couple of goals, that's problematic. But in general, they're playing well. Again, they're well enough to be ahead of 21 teams on the countdown. So, yeah, I haven't bumped them out of the top 10. Number 9, they started the season at 6, dropped to 7. They were 10 last week, and they move up to 9 this week, and that's Toronto. Now, with the loss of John Tavares, there are other entities in the media who would immediately drop them on the power rankings. And I'm going to explain this now for people who may not know how mine work is compared to others, because I know there's others that do this. I don't care who's injured. All I care about is the results. There are other power rankings that would drop Toronto greatly because they'd be like, oh, they got Tavares out, they're going to struggle, so we've dropped him. No, power rankings to me are how is this team playing right now? And for Toronto, that victory over Boston, did they play a perfect game? No. But did they win it in the end? Absolutely. So in a week where Toronto kind of was middling at points, they were still on the positive end at the end of it. And for that reason, I had them move up one spot over where they were last week. Number 8, they started the season at 17. They were 17 the week after, and they were 18 the week after that. But you know what? A long winning streak will do that. It'll make you go higher. So they move up 10 spots this week. Pittsburgh, I know they lost in a shutout tonight, but you know what? They've played a lot of hockey too, and they've played pretty well. They're 6-3 right now, and so Pittsburgh, pretty solid start to the season. Their depth guys have been fantastic. They did get shut out tonight, but it wasn't for a lack of chances. That was Marc-Andre Fleury coming into town and going, "Hi guys, you remember me? Yeah, I'm just gonna take this game. I'm just gonna steal it. It's mine. Thanks. Thanks for letting me steal the game." So I didn't penalize them for that. So again, this is where it's different this year from last year. I look at that game and I go, they played pretty well, and they had a nice long winning streak coming into this. I'm not suddenly going to drop them because of that one result. Where last year I would have. Number 7. They started the season at 28. They moved up to 20. And then last week they moved up to 13. And check it out. Anaheim's in the top row. They look like a playoff team right now. They absolutely look like a playoff team right now. And their scoring is starting to round out. Their goaltending is fantastic, whether it's Miller or Gibson. Their numbers are excellent. And they look confident. They look like a completely different team than the one last year that Randy Carlyle was running while they went on that 48-game losing streak or whatever it was. It was ridiculous. Bob Murray took over and things kind of got better, but it was such a disjointed season. And this year, they look like the Anaheim Ducks of the year before last. They look like the Anaheim Ducks that put up 100-point seasons seemingly at will. And they're back. And the play of guys like Steele and Comtois and Jones, they're playing well. And as long as those kids are still playing well, even if they're not necessarily producing all that much offensively, but if they're providing the type of support for your top guys that you need, Anaheim's going to surprise some people from here on out. You can ask Buffalo about that one. Number 6. They started the season at number 1, both of the first 2 weeks, and then last week I dropped them to 11 because they kept blowing leads. Well, this week they seem to have learned from that. I've got Washington back up to 6th, and Washington's playing pretty well. They're right now sitting 3rd in their division behind Pittsburgh and Carolina, and they're tied in points with Pittsburgh and Carolina. That's where the overtime losses come in handy. Those 2 points that they have already with overtime and shootout losses have them in a tie for first place in their division. Washington has John Carlson with 17 points right now. He wants the Norris. He wants the Art Ross. He wouldn't mind having the Hart Trophy. And if they could make a trophy for the guy who leads the league in assists, he'd really appreciate it because right now he's got 14 of them. So, Carlson's playing fantastic. And Holtby looks like he's bouncing back. He's supposed to play again tomorrow. They're in Chicago. So that'll give us a really good idea about whether or not Holtby has bounced back, because Chicago is capable of scoring some goals, and getting that theme song stuck in your head. You guys know what I'm talking about. It gets stuck in my head every time I talk about Chicago. Number 5. They started the season at 16. They moved up to 12. Then they moved up to 3. This week they're down to 5. And that's Carolina. Tough road trip. And so I dropped them down. Again, I didn't have some dramatic shift for them. I think they're still playing some of the best hockey in the National Hockey League. A little bit concerned about Mrazek's overall numbers. If you look up Mrazek's overall numbers, they haven't been great. But again, you can look and say it's a small sample size. And Peter Mrazek has never statistically been a top 10 goaltender. So, the wins are still there. They're 6-3. So, no harm, no foul. You keep up that rate of winning versus losing, you're going to be one of the top teams in the league all year. Number 4. They were number 4 to start the season. They moved up to number 2 the week after that. They were number 2 last week. That's Boston. So we've seen Boston at number 1 on power rankings that I don't know if you guys have paid attention to anybody else's, but I've looked at other power rankings and I keep seeing Boston at number 1. Which, that's fine. To me, it feels more like people are picking them for number 1. I think in part because they should have beat Colorado and they didn't, or something along those lines. But Boston's had their very, very minor issues. So again, being top 5 means you're not struggling. But for me, they haven't been the best team in the league. They just haven't. And so I have them back down at 4 where they started the season. I do expect them to stay pretty darn good. But that loss tonight against Toronto shows they can be beaten. And Halak looked human tonight. He wasn't standing on his head. And I don't expect their goaltenders to stand on their head every night like they pretty much did last year. Especially Halak. During the regular season last year, Halak was fantastic. You can expect that to kind of get clawed back a little bit this year. So, overall, Boston's still pretty good, but they are, for me, definitely 4th. 3rd, they started the season at 22nd. Yeah, 22nd. They moved up the following week to 14th. Last week, they were 4th. This week, Buffalo is number 3. I think they're for real. Watching them against San Jose tonight, there's a lot of differences between the Buffalo Sabres right now and last year. They look more confident. Their goaltending looks more steady. They're putting up really solid numbers all around. And adding Olofsson, even though Olofsson hasn't scored in the last couple games, you know what? It doesn't really matter. Their scoring depth is there. Their defense has been better. And again, Buffalo's Achilles heel has been their defense for the most part. And right now, it's not a problem. Their defense has been really pretty darn good. So number 2 was number 27 the first week. They were number 22 the week after that. And they were number 6 last week. And that's the Oilers. So the Oilers and the Sabres, in my eyes, are for real. And the Oilers being 7-1, and I know there's people who are, we can't wait till they fall apart. And people are, whatever. If it was anybody but the Oilers, we wouldn't be hearing it. Honestly, any team starts 7-1, we're going to be talking about how great they are, but because it's the Edmonton Oilers, because of the jersey they're wearing, and because of that organization's recent history, we expect them to fall apart. I don't know that it necessarily keeps up like this, but if they play, let's just say they play 500 hockey from here. So they win the same amount of games they lose from here. That would mean they have 88 points this year. That is a huge improvement over last year. Now let's just say they go 5 games above 500 from here. They end up with 93 points. That probably makes the playoffs. With the way the West looks right now, you probably make the playoffs with 93 points. The Oilers don't have to be world beaters from here, neither do Buffalo. They just have to be good. So when you get these points in October and you get those large leads over other teams and you're putting those points in the bank, they come in really handy in March and April when you're trying to determine your position in or out of the playoffs. Those points in October are just as important as all the rest, and they've got them in the bank. The confidence is there with both of these teams. So as amazing as it looks, both Edmonton and Buffalo being in the top 3, and Colorado being number 1. I want us to take a moment and realize that if I 2 years ago had a power rankings that had Buffalo, Edmonton, and Colorado as the top 3, you can guarantee it would have been when I would switcheroo at the end and take the teams from the bottom, put them at the top, put the teams to the top, take them to the bottom. He's got Minnesota, Ottawa, and Dallas. Dallas wasn't this bad a couple years ago. Ottawa was pretty good a couple years ago until about the 15-game mark, and then it fell apart. And then Minnesota, of course, they were still a playoff team 2 years ago. This is absolutely crazy. But to me, those are the 3 teams that are playing the best hockey. Buffalo I had in 4th place coming into tonight. Boston loses in overtime. They go in and beat San Jose and San Jose. They, to me, are now number 3. And Boston I have no problem dropping to number 4. And I've been watching power rankings from NHL.com and from TSN and from all these others. And it seems like there's some hesitancy with some of these early starts for people to embrace them. And my early power rankings show that first week I really wasn't embracing it. But yeah, with last week I started, and this week I'm all in that, yes, I believe these teams right now are playing the best hockey. So again, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happen upon this video. And just as an added benefit at the end, I'm not going to do the big switcheroo thing I used to do. If I had to bet on who the big risers could be next week, give the Rangers some games. Give Florida some confidence when they have a lead. Let Arizona keep scoring. And the Islanders just keep playing the way they've been playing. They'll move up. So those are 4. 4 teams that I think could drop. Pittsburgh still has issues with depth. Maybe with the end of that winning streak, a losing streak is coming. Vancouver's on the East Coast. That doesn't normally bode well for them from last year, and right now I'm concerned about this year. Has Carolina overachieved? Are we starting to see some cracks with them? They don't play again until Thursday, where they're playing in Columbus. And is Colorado going to end up tuckering themselves out? Does Colorado end up going through some challenges this coming week, which pulls them out of where they've been the last 2 weeks, which is number 1. So there you go. 4 that I think could jump and 4 that I think could drop next week. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Which teams do you think are going to end up jumping up the standings, and which ones do you think are going to drop down? And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And of course, every Saturday night, we're here for the power rankings, which I believe most of you watch Sunday morning. Thank you for that, and I will talk to you again soon.